We're going to move on to our next presentation. This is about building leadership capacity. So driving this presentation is Jonathan Kaiswatum. Yes. Cree from the Payapot, yes. First Nation. Jonathan is rooted in his culture and language. His ideology as an educator and administrator has been guided by indigenous worldviews of leadership. Much of his work focuses on integrating his ideology into data-driven approaches to create educational sustainability. Currently, Jonathan is the Director of Education for Tsuut'ina Nation and an advocate for indigenous education. In the presentation, Jonathan is going to focus on using data to drive school improvement and inform practice. As the Director of Education for Tsuut'ina Nation, he has experienced some unique opportunities while utilizing data-driven approaches to support the needs of students, educators, staff, and families. Jonathan will discuss how he and the leadership team are now using data to create educational sustainability within Tsuut'ina Nation schools. Please give a warm welcome to Jonathan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Zinase Guja Size Jonathan Kaiswatum Ata, Payapot Cree Nation, Treaty 4 Territory. Currently, as my friend here mentioned, the Director of Education for Tsuut'ina Nation, Treaty 7 Territory, just west of the city of Calgary. My presentation today is titled Building Leadership Capacity. Previous presentations I've done, I've learned, try not to cover the whole forest, but to focus on one tree. So I just wanted to say thank you to the Learning Bar for welcoming me today to present here. It's such a wonderful opportunity. A nice change of pace for a Wednesday for me, currently in my role overseeing a lot of different aspects. I won't get into all that, but it's been great. I've been in the role for 6 months today, so I'll get into all that as I progress here in the presentation. Just wanted to start off with a land acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation, Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. All right, so there's me here on my first week of work. I hardly bring out the pink shirt, but I figured I would today for Pink Shirt Day, and I am wearing the same outfit. I just wanted to address that in case you're wondering. Just like I said, a number of different experiences in my career. I've been in education for 13 years now. You may not think that looking at me. A lot of people often ask how old I am. I might as well just address it right off the hop. I'm 36 years old. I'll be 37 this year, and I started teaching when I was 24. So very blessed to be in education and very blessed to be on this journey that I'm on. So basically, Tsuut'ina Nation, I just wanted to include this picture in there. This is a picture on my drive to work every day. And like I said, just so it's such a good way to start the day. The days are getting longer, and getting to see this every day, is a good start to the day for me. So this is just west of the city of Calgary. Wanted to put this picture in there just to give you some background of who I am. So this picture was taken in I don't know what grade I was in, 95. I think I was in grade 3 at the time. Although I've been a teacher, principal, educator for the past 13 years, I often say that my journey, goes beyond that because, all of growing up on a First Nation, and my mom being an educator and then her having different opportunities in other communities. I went to school on reserve for all of my 12 years of education, grade 1 to 12 or K to 12. So I include that in there with my years of teaching, experience that I have with me, because it's informed my practice, and it's really, given me direction and guidance and kept me grounded into who I am and where I see Indigenous education going. This is my home community, Paipod Cree Nation, which is in Treaty 4 territory in the Qu'Appelle Valley, about 8 hours away from here. For those of you that are from Saskatchewan, it is north of the city of Regina, so this is where my family is. They're all there, just, living their best lives. That's my family there. And, before I get into it, like I said, really going to be focusing on, how, and really going back to the previous presentation, it couldn't have come at, a more convenient time. And looking at, how do administrators focus that intentional time on getting in the classrooms? I can't remember the exact data, but it said 75% of principals would like to spend their time being in classrooms, but we don't often get to do that. So that's what, my presentation today focuses on. How do we collect data within our education system to measure those indicators of best practice? Wanted to start off with this quote right here. Accountability systems work to the degree that they engage the knowledge, skill, and commitment of people who work in schools. Indeed, the success of accountability policy depends on the development of what I will call practices of improvement. So how do we measure that? Where do we even start? To give you some perspective on our education system, this right here, I believe I have a laser pointer. Cool, I was gonna go point. So you'll see here Calgary, Tsuut'ina Nation borders the city of Calgary just on Tsuut'ina Trail. For those of you that may not know, this ring road right here is called Stony Trail. But when you catch this little section here in the southwest, it actually turns into Tsuut'ina Trail because it is on Tsuut'ina land. And those of you that have been out in that part of the city, you may have seen the administration building, the Costco, Chief Jim Starlight, Sportsplex. So that's, but the nation extends beyond that, right up on Highway 8, Highway 22, and then 22X right here. So it's a fairly large nation, very beautiful landscapes. We do have 4 schools within our education system out there, and just kind of reflecting back, not a lot of people know that we have that many schools, or that, we have that many business ventures. We were just at a career fair a couple of weeks ago, me and one of my colleagues who's here with us today, and we talked to a lot of, teacher candidates, university students, we're looking to recruit to our education system, and, they didn't even know we existed, so that's where we are. Just to give you a little bit of a perspective on, our education authority, we are federally funded, as are all First Nation schools in the country. We are not provincially funded, so that comes with, dealing with Indigenous Services Canada. That's where we get all of our funding in terms of nominal role. So when you look at our structure in Tsuut'ina, we have the citizens, head chief and minor chief, the CEO, and then we have an executive director who I report to, our education board of trustees, and then our department. So this is me right here. I put it in, I tried to enlarge this as big as I can, but that's where I fit within the scope here. We do have an elementary school, Chula Elementary, Chief Big Belly Middle School, and Many Horses High School, which is just behind the Seven Chiefs Sportsplex. We also have a post-secondary education program, and then an adult education center called Bullhead Adult Education Center. And then, just some of the structure within our system, we have, O&M supervisor, our head cook, and then within our department, we have our provincial school liaisons who work with our neighboring school divisions, administrative support, transportation, and we do have here our financial department as well as our IT department. So for me, there are about 175 to 200 employees within our system, who report to the principals, and then the principals report to me. So which is kind of, like looking at that, starting at the end of August in this role and kind of looking at, holy cow, where do we even start to try and make change within this system? And there was a lot of history, that happened, and, kind of just a lot of heavy lifting within this first year. But, being grounded in that practice of improvement and instructional leadership, I'll get into all that here. I don't want to spoil the surprise. So, Tsuut'ina Education Teacher Professional Growth and Observation Report. So we have here, when I kind of looked at, where do we even start to looking at, changing an education system, building on, existing areas that are working well. I kind of always looked at it as peeling the layers of an onion, in terms of, my metaphor, a visual metaphor for you. I did spend, 6 years in the classroom as a middle school teacher, as a math catalyst, phys ed teacher, you name it, all in First Nations country. And then I spent 6 years as a principal in 2 different communities, Kaiswatum First Nation in southeast Saskatchewan, and Enoch Cree Nation, which is just west of the city of Edmonton. I had the pleasure of being the first principal of the brand new school there, which opened in 2019, and that was when I relocated here to this beautiful province. And then, like I said, my journey led me into senior administration, which is where I'm currently at. But like I said, reflecting on those experiences and looking at, teacher observation. My experiences with teacher observation have been, as a teacher, I look back and I think back to my first year of teaching. And I was kind of just for those of you that aren't familiar, a lot of First Nations systems, they operate on nominal role funding from Indigenous Services Canada, which often leads to, 1-year contracts for teachers. Sometimes you're lucky if you get 2. And I looked at, my experiences, teaching and principalship, year after year, kind of just wondering, not continuous contracts. Thinking back to that first year, I didn't have any evaluations that year. No observations from my principal, because as we know how complex that job can be of a principal. It could be even more complex, when you look at, a First Nation system. So really setting aside that time, and I look at the principal that I operated under, not throwing them under the bus or anything, but I don't feel that, they really kind of made that a priority. But he always kind of told me that I did well, I'm doing good. And, and it was the last day of the school year where HR comes to me and they're like, here's your contract for next year. And I was like, holy, that's so risky. Where's that feedback loop? So I really took those experiences with me into principalship and, starting principalship when I was 29, turning 30, and leading some teachers that taught me when I was a young man. So it was really, it was kind of my first interactions with into leadership. Realizing that it's, it's not a commanding position. It's not a, you listen to me. It's kind of slowly realizing that it's all about collaboration and walking this journey together. And, realizing that early on, with some of the theories that I was learning at the time when I was taking my master's, applying those theories and then going to my classes and taking, that practical experience to those theoretical discussions was a really rich time in my career. And it really prepared me, for everything to come. So I think of those journeys, and why do I say that? Because it really informed, how to start this journey within Tsuut'ina education. And, we already do have a framework here in Alberta called the Teaching Quality Standard that already exists. So to be a teacher in this province, you need to demonstrate proficiency within those standards. And I always ask, how many of you know how many standards there are within the TQS? 6. So there are 6. And you know what, just kind of looking at this document, this ministerial order that came out in 2020, how do we apply this document to our context? You know, how do we really, shape that? Because it gives you some general kind of indicators, but not really any guidance on how to use them. It's kind of just there, and then, so where do we start? At the beginning, constructing the report. Synthesis. So every month we have leadership meetings, we call them. So we have each of our 4 principals, our vice principals, and a little bit of our support staff that come to the meetings, and we just set aside that intentional time to discuss agenda items. And this meeting happened in October, and we looked at, okay, how do we construct, an observation framework based on the Alberta TQS? Where do we even start? In planning that, we looked at a 4 corners activity to understand what an observation looks, sounds, and feels like. So asked our principals. So those of you that are familiar with 4 corners, picture like a big sticky note paper in each corner of this room. And we looked at, okay, what does an observation look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And we had our principals in pairs, in groups, and they just rotated into the different corners and gave their feedback. Looking at getting their perspectives on, what observation evaluation should look, sound, and feel like. After that, right after that, actually, we facilitated another 4 corners activity to determine strengths and areas of improvements of existing templates. Because there are a lot of great templates that exist, most likely within your districts, most likely within other provinces, other First Nations education systems. So we took 4 templates and we put a template at each corner. And again, our principals were in groups of 2 and 3. They just went to that corner, looked at that template, and just gave us some feedback. What are the strengths of this? What are the areas of improvement? Because like I said, we had an existing document, but we really wanted to reshape it into, how do we gather data? How do we make that feedback cycle, like a collaborative process? So start with, just co-creating an existing, or co-creating a new template. Within one of those corners, we had our existing template. So principals had the opportunity to really give feedback on it. Here's what I think the strengths are. Here's what are the areas of improvement. And it was a really rich process. We gained a lot of good information from that activity. Next, making connections to effective practices. So I took pictures at this leadership meeting in October because it was just such a good energy to that meeting. We had, our principals engaged in the process of creating a document that we are going to use to gather evidence based on these standards, to review, reflect, and act on that feedback. So how did we actually get to the meat and potatoes of that? So we looked at each standard within the TQS. There are indicators within those standards. And we collected a bank of specific teaching examples. And we gave them to our principals in a folder with a glue stick. And we cut them up into little strips. And we said, align these. Align these to where you think they should fit within each standard. Within that standard, which indicators should they be aligned with? So really giving them an opportunity to sort of be invested in their own documentation that they're going to utilize. That took about, I want to say 45 minutes because there were so many examples. So picture like this paper right here. This writing, for example, let's say we just cut that and we gave that to the 2 groups of principals and we said, align these. That was kind of, getting into the nitty gritty of that document. From that feedback, we met after that, my colleague, Sarah and I, who is here with us today, who's our Director of Learning, and I'm so glad that she's with us today. We took that feedback that we gathered, from that meeting, and we said, okay, where do we start? And we looked at what the two groups of principals said, and we looked, okay, here's what this group said. They said that effective use of humor should be within, demonstrating or establishing effective relationships under indicator B. So we kind of just really closely aligned. It took us like a good afternoon to do that. But once we were done, we constructed the document to be like this. This is just the first page of it. And really you can see within there, standard 1, fostering effective relationships. Here are the indicators right here. And then here are, like in italicized, you can't see it really clearly, but these italicized points right here are those specific teaching examples. Within our legend, we have meet standard, does not meet standard unobserved. And you might ask why there's a point there for standard unobserved. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. But basically, this was around the time of November that we actually had a draft, version of that report ready. So the middle, now that we have the document, how do we actually carry this process out? Observations provide both administration and teaching staff with the opportunity to review, reflect, and act upon areas that require additional support for teaching staff to reach desired outcomes. This process is collaborative and meant to guide the professional growth of teaching staff. So, in our roles as administrators, really looking at, peeling those layers of the onion, getting principals into the classrooms and getting them to do that in a meaningful way with a document. Not calling it an evaluation, but an observation. To gather some feedback. Here's what I noticed, here's what I'm wondering. Having a conversation with, that teacher, and then giving them the opportunity to set their own growth goals, rather than having a one-off sort of professional growth plan document. Observations have been refined to address the range and continuum of teaching and are applied as a tiered model where teachers early in the continuum are provided more opportunities for classroom visits versus those that are further along in their careers. So looking at this framework as sort of, we have 3 tiers within this framework, and I'll get to those further along here. Tier 1, we have our interim teachers. Those that have not yet obtained their permanent certification, we call those our Tier 1 teachers. All standards observed, with standard 3 observed by the Director of Learning or the Director of Education. Why standard 3, might you ask? Who knows what standard 3 is? So demonstrating a professional body of knowledge, sort of the meat and potatoes of teaching, the instruction part of it. So all teachers, in order to obtain permanent certification, in order for us to sign up, we link this to permanent certification as well, within twins. To be able to gather that certification, we should be able to see them demonstrate, proficiency within that area. Tier 2, permanent teachers with less than 5 years of experience. Standard 3 is mandatory and 2 standards of choice. So basically these are the teachers that, already have that certificate and, but they're kind of in the middle grounds of their careers. Standard 3 is mandatory because that's at demonstrating a professional body of knowledge. And then Tier 3, permanent teachers with more than 5 years. So standard 3 is mandatory and 1 standard of choice. So we give teachers an opportunity to, kind of say to their administrators, what standard would you like to be observed on? Whether that's establishing inclusive learning environments or one of the others. So this is, a tracking sheet that we provided our principals with. You'll see here, we just have teacher name, which grade, and then the dates for which the standards were observed by the administrator, either the principal or the vice principal. Tier 2, again, standard 3, and then 2 standards of their choosing. Tier 3, which is standard 3, and then 1 standard of choosing. So going back to this right here, and just giving you a visual and a tracking sheet of what our administrators use. So next steps, embedding the professional growth plan. In my experience as a principal, asking for a PGP document has kind of always been just like checking off a box. It's like, okay, you need to, telling our teachers within a staff meeting in August that you need to submit this PGP by Thanksgiving. Tell me your goals, and then I'll tuck that away in my desk, and we'll forget about it for the rest of the year. That's been my experience because we get so busy with everything else. So my colleague Sarah and I, we looked at how do we make that PGP meaningful? How do we embed it into this framework? Developing learning goals. So professional growth is a result of identifying professional goals to improve your professional practice and taking action towards that improvement. As each observation occurs, goals, targets, and collaboration have taken place in preparation for the visit embarked upon and next one subsequent. What does that mean? So basically it means that after the observation has occurred, here's that feedback template that we've included within that document. They take the date, the subject, the outcome, and then utilizing a 3-2-1 model. 3 things that I learned from being in your classroom. Well, here's what I learned, from that quick 20-minute observation. I learned that, and we really coached our principals to look for or give feedback points on that standard with which they're observing. So let's say that's establishing inclusive learning environments. Give 3 feedback points for that standard. 2 questions that I have. Now this part right here, it's we framed it in a way that it's tough. It's tough to give feedback. So we framed it in a way that our principals are asking questions to our teachers. I noticed that, can you tell me more about this? Framing it in a way that they want to know more. They want the teachers to expand on, the areas of growth. And then finishing it off here with one thing that I enjoyed. So I don't do this. This process right here is carried out by our principals, by our vice principals. So we can allow them to get into the classrooms, in a meaningful way. Not just pop by, say hi to the kids, everything's all good, and then they're off. But they're gonna actually use this document to collect that evidence, collect data. And then post-observation right here. This is where we implemented that PGP part of it. So the post-observation. So this part right here, so the answer to this question that the principal has goes right here. And then what is the timeline for that strategy? So the answer to question B will go right here, and then the teacher will provide themselves with a timeline to meet that goal. So it's not a one-off PGP document, it's embedded within this observation framework. Embedding it. So once goals have been identified, it's important to think about the strategies, timelines, resources that teachers will employ to achieve the goals. And as I had mentioned, opposed to producing an additional format like the PGP to accomplish that. Meaningful measures and indicators of success. An effective professional growth plan involves pre-identifying indicators of success and measures or data that are relative to achieving the professional development goals. So when we say to our principals, before you schedule that next observation, check in with your teachers on their goals. And it's all done electronically on Google Drive. None of it is, we're all paperless. Any assessment plans, any lesson plans that our teachers submit, any pictures that our principals take are all uploaded into the Google Drive, and teachers have an opportunity to really answer those questions that our principals have. and provide a timeline for when they want to implement that. So really, it's an ongoing document. Meaningful measures, again, just some questions here that we wanted our principals to consider. What do I anticipate will be different, or wanted our teachers to consider, sorry. What do I anticipate will be different in my professional practice as a result of accomplishing this goal? What will my students be doing differently? And how do I anticipate student learning will change or improve as a result of achieving this professional goal? So really focusing on growth as sort of our goal. It's not about observations. It's not about to provide you with a contract. It's not about a way to get rid of you. It's a way to help you grow as a teacher. It's a way for us to retain you, because as we all know, teacher turnover, administrator turnover rates, you know, they're high as it is, but I would say they're even more so within First Nations education. So this model really gives us one way to help our teachers grow to be, you know, the best versions of themselves. Again, as I kind of mentioned, digital portfolios, lesson plans, assessment, differentiation plan can be submitted prior to the observation, and then pictures can be uploaded. I'm a big fan of evidence, data, in that, you know, pictures are worth 1,000 words. And, you know, we encourage our principals, you know, when you're conducting an observation, feel free to take a picture of what that classroom looks like. Use that as a starting point for your conversation. Ask your teachers, you know, what do you notice when you look at this picture? It's all really, you know, about the data we collect. And just kind of ending on some points here, talking about reform in educational leadership, collaborative leadership, recognition of the capacity of professional educators, and the imperative of leveraging and exchanging that capacity. So collaborative leaders co-construct classroom and building level goals with staff around the teacher observation process. So again, I just wanted to include this quote in here just because it speaks to this collaborative leadership model. Not, you know, like a top-down managing, you know, kind of model, but really that walking this journey with your teachers. Just a couple of points here. Deep collaboration happens when we plan together to address a challenge. So asking teachers in a way that okay, 2 questions that I have. What is your plan for addressing that challenge based on that standard? We test and refine our planning, so cycle of planning, observation, and reflection. So that whole cycle of planning, going back to that tiered model, not all of our teachers need to be observed 6 times. There are some that, you know, have 25 years of experience. They may need only 2 observations. You know, but what happens when those 2 observations are done? You know, starting over again. Always getting our teachers to refine their practice and gathering evidence and data to support that. Observational inquiry contributes to shared data about the context of instruction. Formative, observable data will drive instruction goals and PLC work. Again, you know what, really looking at all of the data that we collect through the observations, it's not done by me at a senior leadership level. It's really at the school level. And us checking in with our principals. How are those observations going? How is so-and-so doing? You know, where do you think they could grow? Some of the conversations that we've had so far with our principals have been really rich in that regard, because like I said, it allows them to get into the classrooms. Set aside that intentional time. Set aside a time to, you know, plan and reflect on that observation. So what's next? Again, I kind of looked at, you know, at this presentation and looked at the date of it and the date that we implemented, you know, the Our School survey. I have worked with the Learning Bar in, you know, my previous experience with the EYE assessment and with the Our School survey. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that both of those data points that are collected and the reports that are generated are so rich, and you know what, they can be used to inform school improvement on a system level, you know, on a school level, at a classroom level. It's just so rich. And that is our next step with the Our School survey. I'll just kind of leave that as a point there. So we are in the process of facilitating that for our students, our teachers, our support staff, and our parents. So getting them to, take the survey, provide us with that data, and using that data to inform where we want to go as an education system. Again, it just helps us better understand the needs and wants of our students or all of our stakeholders, using that data to make evidence-based school planning decisions with confidence. The Learning Bar will formulate the reports on our behalf and facilitate professional learning sessions for our staff and parents. So again, in my previous role as a principal, utilizing the Learning Bar's team, Christine, Carlos, Joel, and Lorna, and then having virtual professional development with our staff based on those reports. So they call it a data deep dive. So I didn't want to speak to our experience with the Our School survey in this presentation because we're in the process of collecting it. So I didn't want to stand up here for 45 minutes and talk to you about what I previously have done. I wanted to provide you with, an data source of what we are currently doing. And, maybe I may one day get to share the data that we collect from the Our School survey. But yeah, here's our poster that we sent out. So as you can see there, March 14th is the deadline. After that, the Learning Bar will, like I said, take all that data and then really use it to generate those reports. And then we'll kind of decide, what is the next steps, that data deep dive, how do we use this? And as you can see here, we kind of just got some prizes to get some parents out. Chance to win a smart TV or a Cineplex Odeon Family Pass. Thank you to my colleague again, Sarah, for gathering those prizes. We just kind of had an impromptu discussion. How do we get parents out? Parents are really engaged in our education system, and I don't see it being an issue for them to come in at a parent advisory council meeting to complete the parent survey. But this is just kind of a prize for them. If you do, you'll be entered in a draw to win a TV, which is kind of a nice twist to it. So yeah, I'm really excited because we are in a phase right now within our education system of transformation, looking at different funding models, aligning all of our strategic plans, and giving this data and these reports to our board of trustees to say, here's where we're going with our system. Here's what we're going to use to inform our practice. People always say, and here's one example I'll use, oh, there's bullying in the school. My kid's getting bullied. There's bullying, I don't, but the data will tell us, maybe it'll tell us otherwise. It'll give us some hard facts on that data. So I'm really a proponent of using, those data systems, whether that be the Our School survey, EYE, PATs, SLAs, diploma exams, FNP tests, and then now our teacher observation, to help our teachers grow. Also, what's next is we're in the process of developing an LQS framework for our principals so that we can observe our principals in action, gather some data, and help them grow as well because we want to retain them. But I'll save that presentation for another time. Are there any questions? I think I have 3 minutes.
Any questions?
I got engaged in that last part, the survey.
Yeah.
You are offering a draw, but to offer a draw, you cannot have confidentiality. It was some kind of concern because in my case, every time we send a draw, we offer confidentiality to get also the bad responses, the people that thinks that is not satisfied with service. We want to capture that, and that's why we try to keep it confidential, because many people even say there, my kid is this, the name and everything,
Yeah.
but others not. So how do you balance that, or
Well,
what were...
if they want to enter, responses are autonomous. So we tell them that, we don't see the results. if you complete it, just put your name on a piece of paper. Yeah.
And you have had, like, the perception that, of parents that are not satisfied?
Nope, nope.
Any other questions?
The light is really bright.
Just curious about the balance between the federally funded, but obviously all of your outcomes, all the work you're doing is definitely aligned with the TQS and Alberta education. Is there a struggle or a conflict there at any point with how you have to report for the federal piece?
So we're not, financially or fiscally, I guess, required to report to the provincial government because they don't fund us, but we do use Alberta Education, twins, obviously the curriculum, we do teach Alberta curriculum, balanced with our own Tsuut'ina Nation curriculum in terms of language and culture. But yeah, every year we go through the same processes, we submit declarations, we sign off, we submit all our schedules, all that, so. But it's really Indigenous Services Canada that we report to on that end. So.
Great. Any other questions?
I'm just curious, so your school leaders set the leadership, your school leaders set the leadership actions that you would want to see in the TQS. Did you have any space where you engage the teachers in that same process, or is that something that you would do down the line, so that they also contributed to that?
Yeah, actually, so there's, at the end of the document, there's, before it's, I should have included that last page, but when it's signed off on, they have the opportunity to reflect on that process and give feedback to our principals on, how it was collaborative and just different data points. There's 3 questions that teachers have the opportunity at the end to do that. Yeah.
I think we,
So Jonathan, in my 30 years of teaching, my teacher professional growth plan has always been a very personal document to me. And I imagine with your teachers the same way. And I see that the professional growth plans are really tied very strictly to TQS. Do you allow for the opportunities for teachers to be able to delve down their own paths of learning that may or may not tie to, or it may tie additionally to the teacher professional growth plan, or TQS, excuse me?
Yeah, basically within the Our School survey, that teacher component, and how they want to inform our system, in terms of improvement. But also just through conversations with our principals, not really kind of informally, I guess, on the day-to-day, here's where I'd like to. And that's where we really tie in our student success plans, engaging with our staff, engaging with our teachers, and then aligning each of those plans that exist within our schools. Like I had mentioned, also our Board of Trustees has a strategic plan, aligning all of them, and then are sort of developing those school goals, those school improvement goals for our system. So they'll have a chance to provide voice within that as well. So.
Sorry, I was just curious if, we were talking about how, although you are funded federally, that you are quite linked within Alberta Ed.
Yeah.
Are you also linked with other Indigenous education systems across the country? Is there alignment in any way as far as both through a TQS and a leadership standard?
No, because we have the autonomy to govern that system within our education district. We have, the autonomy, we're not like a CBE or a CCSD where we have there's a huge organizational gap that exists, from provincially funded systems to federally funded. We don't have a lot of those systems that exist I don't know, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but we do have a lot more autonomy in that regard to sort of develop these models ourselves. So, I hope that answers your question, yeah.
I unmuted the microphone. So you're using the TQS, but there's also an LQS that you were talking about developing your own. Would that be modeled on the Alberta one, or would it have a particular one specific to Tsuut'ina? Would it have more of an Indigenous leadership model?
Yes.
Different. So I'm wondering then, if you're going to have more of an Indigenous model towards the LQS,
So
would
that's,
you have an Indigenous model towards the TQS, knowing holistic ways of teaching and learning that may be different than a structured Alberta education model?
so basically, and I'm glad you brought that point up, because there is a standard within the TQS that focuses on applying First Nations ways of knowing. But we've taken that standard and we've, switched it to Tsuut'ina ways of knowing and Tsuut'ina language and culture. And, it's embedded in there. We've also done the same thing with our draft LQS. So we've looked at the LQS framework and really looking at, adapting it and, making it Tsuut'ina Education's LQS, if that answers your question.
Is that informed through practice or through elders or through, how does the entire culture fit into that?
Well, our Board of Trustees will approve the document. We do have an elder on our Board of Trustees. And then also too, when we're looking at education transformation, engaging with the community, showing them some of our draft documents and, some of our plans for moving forward. Yeah. And we do, like I said, our Board of Trustees is really, they're all nation members. They're all from the community and they really guide, me in my role. I'm their only employee. And to hear that on my first day of work, it's a lot of responsibility, but we do it gracefully, we do it as a team. I always keep in the back of my mind what it's like to sit in the chair of a principal and not lose sight of that with everything else that we have going on, with transformation, with our service agreements, transportation. There's so many areas, that require support. And looking at, I'm really excited for what's to come for our system in terms of, conversations with ISK. Looking at models within Canada that exist, such as MESC, such as El Posito in Nova Scotia. And then really getting us, to that level in terms of, how do we want to structure our system and, make it a place where teachers want to come, where students want to come. Because we are so close to the city of Calgary, students do attend within, the city schools. But we want, to kind of attract, and retain to our own schools. Because I do believe, we can be the best. So that's, yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan. That is so enriching and sensational.
Yes.
So sensational. Yeah. So we'll take a break for 15 minutes and then come back for the next session.
See you.
And we have cookies for you guys outside. So.